This topic of terrorism is one that's very personal to me, and it's one that I haven't spoken about in public, with the exception of testifying in Parliament in Belgium on the 22nd of last month. Exactly 1 year prior to that, on the morning of the 21st of March 2016, I was in the Raleigh-Durham Airport flying to New York City. Taking an early flight and was in conversation with my friend Bob Bonzak. You might know Bob from Chapel Hill. I saw a text from my daughter and didn't respond because I was talking to Bob. And then my phone rang. I didn't answer it till I excused myself from Bob and looked down at my text, and it was from my daughter. She said she was living in New York, and she said Alex, her boyfriend of 4.5 years, says Alex was on the flight in Brussels. I didn't know what she was talking about. It dawned on me that as I'd walked by the 42nd Street Oyster Bar there at the airport, I had seen a television monitor in the background with something about an explosion in Brussels. And so I picked up the phone, called Cameron, and she said, Dad, Alex and Sasha, Alex's sister, were at the airport in Brussels at the Delta ticket line. We're on the phone with their mother when the phone went dead, and I can't reach them. So I frantically started making phone calls, reaching out to whomever I could. Couldn't learn anything. Flew to New York, landed in New York, had a call from a friend of mine who said that there's a guy from Raleigh being interviewed on CNN about the Brussels airport terrorist attack. And his name is Mark Noel. You might know Mark Noel. He formed a company called Nomacor here in Raleigh. So I know Mark. I called Mark. Mark was outside of the airport. He'd been in the airport when the blast went off. I said, Mark, this is Jim Cain. He said, Jim, thank you so much for calling. Oh, I'm so blessed. I'm such a lucky man. I don't know why I was saved. I said, Mark, hold on 1 second. My daughter's boyfriend and his sister were in the Delta ticket line. Where were you when the blast went off? He said, they were in the Delta ticket line? I said, yeah. He said, Jim, the news is going to be really bad. So I called my wife and suggested she fly from Raleigh to New York, and went to my daughter's apartment, and we spent the day frantically trying to find Alex and Sasha, trying to call our contacts at the embassy or at the State Department or in Brussels or wherever to seek help finding those two children. Helen got there about 4 o'clock. Media had picked up on the fact that there were 2 kids from New York who were missing among the 30 that were already confirmed dead in the airport and the subway. And they figured out that there was a relationship between one of them and the former American ambassador. So there were TV trucks parked outside the apartment on Lower East Side of Manhattan. About 5 o'clock is we're frantically searching through our contacts. Cameron pulls her mother and me close on the sofa, and she says, I got something to tell you, Mom and Dad. We said, what's that? She said, 1.5 years ago, Alex and I were secretly married in New York. We loved Alex. We knew they would eventually get married, but we didn't know they had been married. But what that meant was, instead of searching for a boyfriend, we were searching for a son-in-law and a husband. So we called our friends at Delta, and they helped us get on an immediate flight, flew to Brussels, and we spent a day and a half searching the hospitals of Brussels for Alex and Sasha. I think words don't describe adequately how horrible that experience was. We were ushered through the different hospitals. I'd called my friend Jim Reese, former head of Delta Force, who runs a company called Tiger Swan here in Raleigh, to send us support, both security and resources to help us in our search. I'd reached out to the U.S. Embassy, of course, and other assets. We spent a day in the military hospital in Belgium trying to find our children. The whole world thinking, by the way, that it was a boyfriend, because my wife said, look, she said to Cameron, you cannot tell anybody that you're married to Alex until you tell your grandfather and grandmother and your sister. And we didn't want to call them until we knew the fate of Alex and Sasha. So for a day in the horrible, hot basement of that hospital, we conducted a search for the kids with an abysmal lack of what you might call customer service. There were 20 families huddled down there looking for their loved ones from 17 different countries and at least a dozen different languages. No counseling, no therapy, no support for our daughter. About 4 o'clock, a woman came in and said, told my wife. She said, there are 4 victims in this hospital who we can't identify. And my wife said, well, let us see them. Let us find them. And the nurse said, oh, no, the special prosecutor has jurisdiction and won't let anybody see the victims. And like, what do you mean? Any mother will know her child regardless of what condition they're in. Wouldn't let us see them. So I started calling anybody I could think of, including the king and queen, to try to force the special prosecutor to let these parents visit the unidentified victims. That didn't seem to help, so we went to the media, and there were cameras parked out front of the hospital, so Helen and I went to the hospital cameras in the front and had an impromptu press conference, which made some difference. It went viral on CNN and Sky News. And pretty soon there was a lot of activity at the hospital, including more security to watch out for whatever we did next. About 7 o'clock, officials came in and said they had now identified all victims who were still alive, and they produced a list. And they said, if your loved one's name is not on this list, you can presume they're dead. It was that compassionate. So they put the list on a desk in the corner of the room. Helen ran to it and, after checking twice, didn't see Alex and Sasha's names. The evolving scene reminded me of what I remember reading in Dante's Inferno. The anguish in that room was beyond description. But we left and went back to the hotel, and Cameron then called her grandparents and her sister, told them that we knew that Alex and Sasha were dead, and of course informed them that she had married Alex several months earlier. The next morning, the Dutch ambassador came in, and the Pinchovskis were Dutch, and confirmed that the remains had been identified. So Cameron and her mother-in-law went to identify Alex and Sasha at the morgue. And we now know that, we knew later maybe that they had been killed in the first blast, and in fact that their identities were known to the first responders within an hour or two of the blast. So before we ever even left New York to fly to Brussels, the first responders knew that they'd been killed, but the bureaucracy of Belgium didn't allow them to tell anybody. So in the days following, as I searched, as you would expect, for purpose and meaning in that unimaginable experience, and as I continue to search for meaning and purpose in that experience, there are a couple of messages that I dwell on, and I'll just throw them out, John, and we can talk about them later or not, and I'll do this as quickly as I can. But one is that in this fight, and this was an ISIS cell that blew these bombs up, killed my son-in-law. In this fight against ISIS, against terror, the world has to get serious about it, and America has to lead. We now know that these 4 ISIS terrorists who killed themselves and my children in the airport were known to our intelligence services. They were part of the Paris cell that had blown up the bombs in Paris in November. We knew who they were. We knew where they were. The Turks knew where they were. The Israelis knew where they were. We'd shared that information with the Belgian authorities. Belgium ignored it. We had advised Belgium that something serious was going to happen, but because of the Belgian privacy laws, which are similar, by the way, to a lot of European laws, Belgian police can't be forced to work on the weekend. So they waited until Monday to raid the apartments where these terrorists were building their bombs, and by that point the terrorists had moved the bombs to a warehouse, and the explosions took place on Tuesday morning. So it became obvious to us that this dysfunctionality and lack of coordination and sharing of intelligence services was a real problem, and there are many other problems. I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple weeks after that, early April, calling Belgium the closest thing to a failed state in Europe, and comparing the world's coming together after 9/11 with the fact that in 9/11 there were around 3,000 people killed in America. There have been more people killed than that in the West by terrorist acts since 9/11. And I questioned whether the world had the willpower to collaborate and fight this ISIS terrorist threat in a serious way, and whether America had the willpower, quite frankly, to lead. And this was in April of the Obama administration's last year, and I was convinced that we didn't have the willpower to lead. And I called out NATO in this op-ed to reinvoke Article 5. I called out the White House, or whoever might succeed President Obama, to get serious about this threat. I had a call the next day from Fogh Rasmussen, my old friend, the former Danish prime minister who had become NATO's Secretary General, and he said, you're exactly right. He said, Belgium is a failed state, and NATO should have taken the lead in making sure we had security covered long before now. Within about 2 weeks, the Trump administration pivoted and said, okay, NATO has to get serious about security and terrorism, and they are now. But my first point is that the Western world has to get serious about this threat, and America has to lead. My second point is, to fight this threat effectively, we have to disable the social media network that's built and owned by America that these terrorists operate on. And Congressman, I'm glad that you're here to hear this. We know that the terror plots in Paris and Brussels, including those that killed Alex and Sasha, were planned and plotted and funded and recruited and carried out by ISIS exclusively using Twitter. It's ironic. ISIS uses Twitter, Facebook, Al-Qaeda uses Facebook. 40,000 active ISIS-related sites on Twitter operating in 2016. Congressman Ted Fogh, for about 12 months, had been trying to convince the FBI to shut down Twitter's terrorist communication platform. One of your colleagues testified on the floor of the House a week before the Brussels blast, so between Paris and Brussels, testified that there were 12,000 active ISIS-related threats in Europe coming through Twitter, and wondering why in the world we can't stop them. Twitter responds, and this is an article in Mother Jones magazine, which was a fascinating article, responds that, well, we can't infringe on free speech because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. The U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act prohibits any American entity, company or otherwise, from doing anything to support or provide platform for terrorists. So there's no action coming out of Washington at the time. So I'm proud to say that my daughter, in February of this year, became the lead plaintiff in a lawsuit in New York City against Twitter, Cain versus Twitter, to shut down this terrorist platform that gives ISIS and its henchmen a way to plot, plan, and execute their global strategy. It's a 125-page, 666-count complaint that catalogs the historical rise of ISIS and their use of Twitter and Twitter's refusal, in spite of evidence provided by our FBI, refusal to shut that down. And Congressman, I hope that Washington will support this effort, and I hope that the courts of America will not be intimidated by Twitter's limitless resources. My final point is that America needs to support its victims of terrorism wherever they are. The morning of Friday the 25th, when Cameron was visiting her husband in the morgue, John Kerry was laying flowers at the airport about a mile away. Our daughter never heard from John Kerry. She never heard from anybody with the administration or the State Department. There's no program in America to support American victims of foreign, really, or domestic terrorism. We had a great program after 9/11, very generous support for all victims, regardless of whether they're American or Cuban or Belgian, and there were Belgian and Cuban victims in 9/11. But there's no program in America. In fact, there are not many programs anywhere. We got a letter in January of this year from the King and Queen and Prime Minister saying they were proud to announce a program in Belgium to support victims if you were a resident or citizen of Belgium. That didn't make me very happy, so I dashed off a letter to the King, and which got printed in the media over there. We were invited to testify in Parliament on the 21st, which is why we were there for that testimony, and I'm hopeful that it will do some good. The UK has a terrific program. We met a lady named Suzanne Sutcliffe, whose husband had been killed in the Brussels metro attack. She's a UK citizen. Her husband was also Dutch. The UK provides a team of people who are there to help victims wherever they are in the world. It's a good program. So, Congressman, those last 2 points in particular I share with you in hopes that perhaps you'll carry those messages back to Washington. But thank you for the chance to share that personal story, and thanks for the chance to visit with you today.